Tonight, a warm story from a village bathhouse on a cold night, long ago, about the old woman who kept the water hot, the whole village who came in to soak the day away, and the last quiet soak of all, which she kept for herself. The cold came down on the village early that evening, the way it did when winter was near. And in the bathhouse by the road, old Sumi had been heating the water since the middle of the afternoon, so that it would be hot and deep and waiting when the first tired soul came in out of the cold. She fed the fire under the great tub a little at a time, the way you do to bring water up slow and hold it there. And she watched the steam begin to rise off the surface and gather under the low wooden roof. And she knew, by the feel of the air and the smell of the cedar going warm, that it was very nearly ready. The bathhouse was an old one, all of dark, warm wood, low and snug, built around the one great thing in it, the deep cedar tub, big enough for half the village at once, sunk into the floor and filled to the brim with clear hot water. Behind it and beneath it was the fire that heated it, which was Sumi's to keep. In the washing place beside the tub were the little wooden stools and the dippers and the buckets, where a body scrubbed the day's dirt off before going in to soak. And all around, the wood had gone dark and smooth and sweet-smelling, with 100 years of steam. When the water was hot, Sumi went to the door and lit the lanterns, the one inside the door, and the two that hung outside under the roof's edge. And the warm gold light of them spilled out into the cold blue dusk of the village street. That was the sign. All up and down the village, people knew it. When the bathhouse lanterns were lit, the water was hot, and you could come and wash the day away. Sumi had lit them every evening for more years than she counted. And somewhere out there in the cold, a tired person was already seeing the glow of them and thinking, with relief, the bath is open. She went back in to her fire. By the warmth of the stove, the bathhouse cat lay curled and content, as it was every evening, having picked, like the cat in every warm place, the one best spot in the house. Sumi fed the fire another stick and looked at the steam rising off the deep hot water and waited for her village to come. They began to come as the last light went. The first were always the field workers, the ones who had been out longest in the cold and wanted the heat most. They came stamping in out of the dark with the day's mud on them and the day's ache in their backs. And they shed their cold clothes and scrubbed down quick on the little stools. And then they climbed down into the deep, hot water with the long, low groans of men whose whole bodies were grateful at once. Sumi knew that sound well. It was, she always thought, the truest sound in the world, the sound of a tired body meeting hot water, the day going out of it all in one long breath. She heard it 100 times an evening and never tired of it. From her place by the fire, she kept the water hot for them and said her low word of welcome to each as they came. and she knew them all, knew whose back was bad this winter, and who had been up all night with a sick calf, and who wanted only to be left alone in the heat and not talked to. And she gave each of them what they needed, which was mostly just the hot water and the quiet and the warm. The men soaked, and the cold and the work and the long day went off them and out of them into the water. And they came up loose and red and easy, and dried themselves and pulled on their clothes and went back out into the night, but warm now, warm all the way through, warm enough to carry home to their beds. "Good night, Sumi." "Good night," she said. "Mind the ice on the road." And the door slid shut behind them, and she fed the fire and waited for the next. The steam rose. The water lapped. The lanterns burned gold at the door. And outside, the cold deepened. And one by one, all evening, the village came in out of it to be warm. And so the whole village came through, the way it did every evening, family by family. The bathhouse warm at the middle of the cold, dark village like a banked coal. The old men came, who came early and stayed longest, and sat in the hot water up to their chins and talked the slow talk of old men, the weather and the old days, and who was ailing, and nothing much at all. For the bath was where the old men of the village did their talking, and always had been. The young men came and were quieter. The boys came and would have splashed if Sumi had let them, and did a little anyway. A young mother came with her 2 small ones, and Sumi warmed a smaller bucket to just the right heat for the little bodies, and the mother washed them and dipped them in. And the children, who had been cross and overtired and crying not an hour before, went soft and quiet and round-eyed in the warm water, the way the smallest children do, until they could barely keep their eyes open. And the mother sat back in the steam with one drowsy child leaning on each side of her, and a look on her face of a woman who has, just for that moment, everything she needs. They all came. The whole village passed through the one warm water, an evening at a time, washing off not only the dirt of the day, but the day itself, the cold and the work and the worry and the small hurts of it, and going home lighter for it. And they met there too, in the steam, all of them undressed and equal and easy, the well-off farmer and the poor one in the same hot water, the way it had always been. The bath was where the village softened and met itself, and was for an hour just warm bodies glad of the heat together. And Sumi kept it all going, the fire, the water, the warm, the still centre that the whole evening turned around, asking nothing, only feeding the fire and keeping it hot, so that her village could come in from the cold and be, for a little while, entirely at ease. Late in the evening, when most of the village had come and gone, the bathhouse grew quieter. And that was when old Goro came, as he came every night. an old man who had lost his wife the winter before and lived alone now in a cold house at the edge of the village. He came late on purpose, Sumi knew, when it was quiet, and he stayed long, longer than the heat alone could explain. And she had understood, without his ever saying it, that the bathhouse was the warmest place left in his life now. Not only the warmest in heat, but the warmest in every way. The one place he came each day where it was bright and warm and someone said his name kindly, and he was not alone in a cold house with an empty chair across the room. So Sumi never hurried old Goro. On the nights he came, she kept the fire up a little longer and the water a little hotter, and she let him soak as long as he liked in the deep, warm quiet. And sometimes she sat near, and they talked a little. The slow, easy talk of two old people who had known each other all their lives. And sometimes they said nothing at all. And that was good too. She gave him, without ever once calling it that, a little more of the warm than the price of a bath. For that, she had always believed, was what the bathhouse was truly for. Not the washing, which a bucket at home could do, but this. A warm, bright place, kept open in the cold, where no one in the whole village need be cold, or alone, of an evening, who did not want to be. When at last old Goro rose and dried himself, and wrapped up warm for the cold walk home, he thanked her the way he did every night, and she told him, the way she did every night, to come again tomorrow. And he said that he would. And they both knew that he would. And that was its own small warmth on both sides. The knowing. He went out into the dark, and the bathhouse was quiet. For old Goro was the last of them that night. Sumi stood a moment in the doorway and looked up and down the village street and saw no one else coming, only the cold dark and the scatter of small gold windows up and down the village, one and then another going dark as all over the village the people she had warmed an hour ago put out their lamps and went to their beds, clean and warm and ready for sleep. The whole village was home. The whole village was warm. She had done that, or the warm water had, and she had kept the warm water. And there was a deep, quiet satisfaction in standing in the cold doorway and knowing it. The way you know a day's work is holy and well done. She went back in and set the bathhouse to rights for the night. She gathered up the little wooden stools and stood them in their row. She rinsed and stacked the dippers and the buckets. She wiped down the wet wood. She banked the fire under the tub down low, not out, for the water was still deep and hot, and would hold its heat a good while yet under the dark wood roof. And then, the work all done and the place all quiet, she stood by the great steaming tub in the lantern light, alone in the warm bathhouse at the still middle of the sleeping village, with nothing left in all the long evening that she had to do. And it came to her, as it came to her most nights at this hour, that there was one person in the village who had not yet had her soak. So Sumi took off her things, there in the warm quiet, and washed herself down on the little stool the way she had shown the whole village to do. And then she climbed, slow and careful on her old legs, down into the great cedar tub, into the deep, hot water she had kept all evening for everyone else. And she sank down into it, up to her chin, and let out a long, low breath of her own, the truest sound in the world. She had made it at the end of 1,000 evenings, and she made it now. The hot water came up all around her and held her, the way it had held the whole village all evening, one tired body after another, and now, last of all, held her. She closed her eyes in the rising steam. The day went off her. The long afternoon of feeding the fire, the standing, the carrying, the ache in her own old back that she never spoke of because there was always someone whose back was worse. All of it loosened and lifted and went out of her into the warm water, the same as it had gone out of all of them. She was tired, and she was old, and the water was deep and hot and kind. And she was, in that quiet, steaming moment, as warm and eased and content as any soul in all the sleeping village she had spent the evening warming. This was hers. After everyone, this. The keeper of the warmth, warmed last and warmed best, in the quiet at the end of the day. The lanterns low, the cat asleep by the banked fire, and the whole village home and dreaming around her in the dark, every one of them carrying to bed a little of the heat she had kept for them. She soaked a long time, in no hurry at all. There was no one left to keep the water hot for now but herself, and she was in no hurry at all to be done. The old woman alone in the deep, warm water, in the low lantern light, her long day washed away at last, the steam rising soft to the dark wood roof, the fire banked low and red beneath the tub, the cat asleep beside it, the lanterns still gold at the door, the whole village warm and clean and sleeping in the cold dark all around the little bathhouse that kept them so, and the keeper of the warmth, warmed at last herself, soaking on in the quiet steam, in no hurry for the night to end.